Thank you for coming to our webinar today. We cordially inform you to be ready for this webinar. The webinar will proceed soon. We ask for your attention to follow the virtual Global Business Excellence Conversations brief so that this event can run smoothly and provide benefits at the end of this event. First, please use your Zoom ID profile as follow: name, dash, organization. For example, Diala-Antam, Cody-IMD. Please use the Q&A box to convey your questions to panelists as follow: name, dash, organizations, dash, panelist name, dash, questions. For example, Diala-Antam, dash, Professor Omar, dash, how do leaders set the directions in crisis? Third, please fill out the survey provided through the chat room, and the presentation material will be shared via chat room. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, salam sejahtera, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the virtual Global Business Excellence Conversations through webinar today. It is an honor to me to inform you that among us, we have Deputy Human Resources, Technology, and Information Ministry of State-Owned Enterprises, Dr. Denni. Assistant Deputy Human Resources, Ministry of State-Owned Enterprises, Mr. Andus Winarno. Assistant Deputy Information Technology, Ministry of State-Owned Enterprises, Mr. Imam Bustomi. Chairman of Forum Ekselen BUMN, Mr. Agung Yunanto. Dean of Institute Management Development, IMD, Southeast Asia and Oceania, Professor Mikuláš Jan Piskorski, or Professor Music. Professor Omar Toulan from IMD as our resource persons today. President and CEO PT Garuda Indonesia Persero Tbk, Mr. Irfan Setiaputra as our resource persons today. Director of Client Engagement at IMD Southeast Asia and Oceania, Ms. Cody Tirumalai. With honor, all of CEOs and directors from state-owned enterprises in Indonesia whom present today. With honor, all of CEOs, managing directors, and directors from companies, consultants in Indonesia and from various countries globally whom present today. With honor, all of senior leaders from Ministry of State-Owned Enterprises, government institutions, education institutions whom present today. The invited distinguished guests in this webinar that cannot be mentioned one by one. Forum Ekselen BUMN, in partnering with Institute of Management Development, IMD, proudly present the virtual Global Business Excellence Conversations. In these sessions, we will discuss about navigating excellence in the new norm. I am Diala Hutabalian from PT Antam Tbk, member of MindID as the host and moderator of this webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, the main agendas of this webinar are opening remarks from Chairman of FEB, Dean of IMD Southeast Asia and Oceania, keynote speech from Deputy Human Resources, Technology, and Information Ministry of State-Owned Enterprises, panelist presentations from President and CEO PT Garuda Indonesia Persero Tbk and Professor Omar Toulan from IMD, discussion and closing. Before we begin this webinar, let's pray according to our respective religions and beliefs. Praying begins. Pray over. Ladies and gentlemen, we will hear the first opening remarks from Bapak Agung Yunanto, representing Forum Ekselen BUMN. He is the chairman of Forum Ekselen BUMN and also Human Capital Director of PT Kereta Api Indonesia Persero. Pak Agung Yunanto, you might take the floor.
Thank you very much, Pak Diala. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Distinguished participant, the Honorable, first is our keynote speaker, Bapak Denni, Deputy of Minister of State-Owned Enterprise of Republic Indonesia for Human Resources, Technology and Information, Assistant Deputy for Ministry Office of State-Owned Enterprise, Bapak Andus and Bapak Imam Bustami. And the second, our speaker, Professor Mokolai Piskorski, Dean of IMD, Institute of Management Development, Southeast Asia and Oceania, Professor of Strategy and Innovation. Our speaker, Professor Omar Toulan, Professor of Strategy and International Management of IMD. Our speaker, our colleague, Bapak Irfan Setiaputra, CEO of Garuda Indonesia Tbk. And our moderator, Mr. Dialah Tabalian from FEB and from Antam, and all distinguished participants of this webinar. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is a pleasure for me to join this commendable occasions. May I start with a gratitude that we are blessed and healthy in such current condition and may gather virtually in this global webinar. This webinar held by Forum Ekselen BUMN, FEB, in collaboration with IMD Switzerland, PT Garuda Indonesia Tbk, and fully supported by the Ministry Office of State-Owned Enterprise. This global webinar attended by almost 500 participants. The profile of participants are 19% is come from the BOD, Board of Director, and 20% of BOD-1, like Executive Vice President and Vice President, and rest are for managerial and professional. Almost 76% participants are from state-owned enterprise, and 13% participants are from private company, and the rest are from government institutions and universities. It is our honor that today the CEO from several state-owned enterprise and private companies also joining this webinar. May I greet our honored CEOs. The first is the CEO of PT Kereta Api Indonesia Persero, Mr. Didi Kartantio, the CEO of Port Corporation 2, Pelindo 2, Mr. Arif Suhartono, CEO of Binakarya Persero, Mr. Irman Indrayadi, CEO of Jamkrido, Mr. Randi Anto, and CEO of LPP Argo Nusantara, Bapak Triaji Priyo Pratomo. Thank you so much for participating in this webinar. Next, I would like to explain the reason why we choose the topic of this webinar is on navigating excellence in the new norm. As we all know, at the moment, many companies still blurred by the fog of uncertainty from the COVID-19 pandemic. At the moment, some companies are still thinking about how to position themselves once the crisis has passed and things return to the normal. While the other companies are still struggling to survive, and some other companies have already found their new purpose. Leading in crisis never been easy. This is the time for our vision and mission being tested as the leader. This is the time for our sailing skill being tested in the middle of COVID-19 chaos. And the Prof said that the strong sailor never made from the smooth sea. Beyond this COVID-19 pandemic and chaotic economic, all we need is to stay positive and we need to stay excellence. We have to believe that every crisis has a life cycle. Every rainstorm has a rainbow in the end. Even though we are not capable to predict the future, but we are still capable to creating scenarios for making the future happen. We have to develop the path to the next normal. So this is the main reason FEB and IMD choose this topic for this global webinar, Navigating Excellence in the New Normal. We need to navigate our strength and excellence, our excellence for our sustainability for entering and leading in the next normal. Thanks for IMD and Garuda Indonesia, who share their insight on how to navigate during this epidemic COVID-19 crisis. Furthermore, why FEB choose IMD as the speaker for this global webinar? Based on Financial Times, IMD ranked as #1 for executive education on open program. So we highly appreciate for IMD contribution at this global webinar. Last but not least, I highly appreciate to all speakers, especially appreciate and special thanks for Bapak Alex Denni and Ministry of State-Owned Enterprise who has been supporting FEB in executing our roles. We also appreciate and thanks for this full support from the CEO, Board of Directors of Stone Enterprises and private companies in Indonesia, and the key management for attending this global webinar. May this forum benefit to all of us. Thank you very much, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Pak Agung. It was a delighting welcoming speech from you. Ladies and gentlemen, we will hear the second opening remarks from Professor Mykolaic Jan Piskorski, representing IMD. Welcome to Indonesia virtually, Prof. Mykolaic. He is the Dean of IMD Southeast Asia and Oceania and also Professor of Strategy and Innovations IMD. Professor Mykolaic, time is yours.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Assalamu alaikum to everybody. I have to tell you, I am so thrilled to be here. Last time I was in Jakarta, it was in February, so it's been way too long since we've been there in person. So I'm delighted that we have an opportunity to speak with so many of you. I'm broadcasting to you from Bangkok, which is where I'm headquartered. We're getting in a better situation here, but as you can imagine, we're also terribly affected by what's happening here. What I want to share with you is just a little bit about IMD, because IMD is a slightly different business school than you might be encountering in the past. We're focused only on executive education, and even though our roots are in Southeast Asia, our roots are in Switzerland, we're very, very heavily involved in Southeast Asia. We work with a number of companies in Indonesia. We're doing a fair amount of research on companies in Indonesia. And one thing that comes out of this research is that Indonesian companies are actually taking a lot of really, really powerful actions in order to change in response to the pandemic. And obviously this is hard. This is taking a lot of toll on the number of companies. People are reporting to us that they're working harder than ever. And so to me, there is a real need for webinars like this to make sure that we do get a chance to share as much best practice as possible from as many different sources as possible, so we can actually achieve big transformation in response to the COVID crisis. What we're also hearing from a number of companies is that this is here to stay. So the new normal is here to stay and will continue to evolve. So many times the changes the companies have made already, they're telling us we need to continue to make new changes and new changes and new changes. So again, for me, it's very important that we continue these conversations so that we can continually support you in the process of adjusting to COVID. One of the things that I think is very important is basically sharing as much as possible between all of us, just to make sure that best practices are going to be shared. And I'm very grateful to my colleague Omar and the various CEOs who are on the call, who will be telling us about the stories that allow them to get to the point where they are. So I hope you enjoyed the webinar. I really hope that you get a chance to learn as much as possible, and I will hand over to my next speaker.
Thank you, Professor Mykolaic. It was an extraordinary and warm welcome, as well as the introduction of IMD as one of the world-class institutions. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, now we cordially invite Deputy Human Resources, Technology and Informations, Ministry of State-Owned Enterprises, Dr. Alex Denni, to deliver the Global Business Excellence Conversations keynote speech. Alex Denni, stage is yours.
Thank you, Pak Diala. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope that you are in good health today. And it is a great pleasure for me again to speak about how state-owned enterprises responds to the new normal because we never know how long the pandemic's gonna last, and everyone always wondering, should we wait for another 3 months, 6 months, 18 months in order to get to back to normal? For me, I still believe that we cannot really predict the futures. So wise man says that if we cannot predict the futures, the best way to do it is to create it. So in order to create the futures, we need to really configure our plan properly and considering some scenarios that might be happen in the near future. So in the State-Owned Enterprises Office, we were talking about the possibility scenarios related to the pandemic of COVID-19. If we do a scenario planning, actually we start from defining the most unpredictable or the most influencing but unpredictable variables that will affect our plan. So the most uncertain in this case, we believe that first, when will the vaccine will discovered? So the vaccine will create the game changing for the situations. But if we couldn't find the vaccine yet, so the virus is still unbeatable. So this uncertain will affect the way we respond to the situations. The second variables that we believe that influence the scenarios is the discipline of society in order to live based on the safety and health protocol according to COVID-19 safety. So those two variables will create 4 scenarios apparently. The first scenarios, which obviously we don't expect to be happen in Indonesia, we call it the death zone, the most dangerous scenarios one. In these scenarios, the virus spread rapidly while the vaccine has not been found yet. So can you imagine how hospital and the facilities will break down because the infected people in a large number of people will affected. And if this happen, of course the fatality rate will be very much high, and businesses will stop to operate. We can imagine that probably the unemployment rate will increasing rapidly, and probably even worse, the social unrest possibility to happen in the scenarios. So we expect that these scenarios really away from our futures. The second scenario is actually with what we call is a new normal. While the virus is still threatening, while the vaccine has not been found yet, but however, the society start to adapt the behaviors, the way of life, comply to the protocols of COVID-19 safety and health protocols. So if the societies are behave and do a practice, a living daily activities by follow the good protocols, for instance, washing hands, using a mask, and keep the distance, physical distancing. So it's my slowing down the rate of infections. If this happen, we can expect that the hospital and the healthcare facilities can be able to handle with care, so the fatality rate will not as high as the first scenarios. So the business start also doing a new ways of business, finding new business models, do a new business processes, and probably new product and new solutions will be introduced to the market. So these scenarios that we call is a new normal, actually a new behaviors of societies and new ways of business conducted by the corporations. So this is actually what we expect while the vaccine is not yet has been found. the third scenarios, there is quite funny actually if it's happened. While the vaccines were discovered and the healthcare system was able to cope with the situations, but the behavior of people who neglect the importance of health and safety protocols back to the previous behaviors. So in this case, I consider we fail to do a relearn on the situations. So if we go back to our profuse behaviors, it seems that we miss the opportunities of learning during this pandemic, and we do expect that people will continue the good health and safety conduct, even though that the vaccine was discovered. So these scenarios, we call it the longer life hope scenarios, while the vaccines has been found in the new futures, and the societies already behave on the new behaviors that comply with more safety and more healthy way of life. So I think those are 4 possible scenarios that are going to happen during the pandemic. And of course, as an engine of economic growth in Indonesia, as you probably know, state-owned enterprises probably contribute 1/3 of our total economy. So if state-owned enterprises moving forward with care, we do expect that the entire economy will also moving forward. So that's why we expect that all state-owned enterprises becoming the accelerator to get into the full new normal. We do believe that currently probably some societies already follow the good conduct and the good protocol of the safety and healthy. For instance, probably majority of people already using masks when going to the public areas, washing hands frequently, then keep the physical distancing and so forth. But still, some other societies probably not yet following those kind of protocols. So we need to leverage the behaviors in order to fully get into the new normal scenarios. So if state-owned company can leverage these behaviors in order to get societies fully comply with the protocols, probably we are going to start rerun the engine of economics. So that's why we expect that the biggest contributor economic growth, state-owned enterprises, will play the significant role in this particular task. We cannot imagine that if we fail to do that, probably we're going to drop down to the scenario 3 or even worse to the scenario 1. Of course, we don't expect these things to happen in Indonesia. So if we see the scenario 2, actually there are 2 parties involved in this scenario. First is society itself, which we expect that to become more disciplined in order to follow the protocols. And the second party is actually the business societies or corporations. We expect that the corporations will find new ways, new business models, new product, new solutions that can be delivered to the customers through a new ways of things. So this is actually expected, initiated and provoked by the state enterprises. So actually, the pandemic itself just a trigger that pulled by the COVID-19, which actually we already aware that these kind of things will happen somehow, sometimes. We call it VUCA, right? Very volatile. The rate of change is very high. The world is getting more uncertain and so forth. So actually, the business challenge nowadays, even on the last few years, already facing the uncertain situations, the very unseen competitors. We cannot definitely identify single 1 or 2 head-to-head competitors because the competitors getting invisible. In the past time, probably if we talk about banking, for instance, the state-owned enterprises bank, if we talk about the competitors, we always say about BCA, CNB, Niaga, Maybank, and so forth. But nowadays, if we talk about competitors of banking, probably Gojek, probably Alipay, probably the new startup companies could be a competitors. So the competitors getting invisible, just like the COVID-19. We cannot see the competitors. So that's why the Industrial Revolution 4.0 actually taught us to be more aware on what could be happen in the futures as a result of the disruption itself. So we know that probably some jobs will decline or even disappear in the next futures, but also probably new jobs need to be created, which means that we need to create a new skills, new knowledge, and new behaviors in order to cope with the new era. So actually, the COVID-19 just as a trigger, to accelerate these transformations actually. So that's why we also need to accelerate our transformation in state-owned enterprises. With or without COVID-19, actually, it should be done by state-owned enterprises. We know that, glad to know, because human capital, human resources considered as one of the top priorities by the government in the next 5 years. And that's why also our minister, Pak Erick Thohir, also put talent as one of the top priorities among other 6 priorities. So this is the time for us to really think, act more serious on developing human capital in the nations. So how do we respond in the state-owned enterprises ministry office? We aim the transformations not only to make the state-owned enterprises become a global player, compete globally, but also we expect that state-owned enterprises become a talent producer for the country, because we do know that the cake of the economy, the size of economy is getting bigger and bigger. Most of analysts predict that our economy will become the top 5 or top 4 in the next 15 years. 2045, for instance, some analysts expect that we are going to go to the top 5 of the biggest economies in the world. So that's why we need to protect those size of economics by producing more talent in order to optimize the benefit for the society. So how do we do this? If previously state-owned enterprise managed themselves as a standalone institutions, and the state-owned enterprises ministry office play a role as an active shareholders, but now we're trying to reformulate those roles actually, while the business itself is trying to consolidate it by the deputy of ministers by creating the subholdings, the sectoral holding, the clusters, and also on the function of human capital itself, we're trying to reformulate our role, not only playing a role as an active shareholder, but we now playing a role as a strategic architect for the state-owned enterprises. So the new roles that played by the state-owned enterprises will expected to accelerate the transformation, because as you probably know, some of our state-owned enterprises already much advanced, in terms of implementing good practices on human capital and so forth. But some other state-owned enterprises, but very much left behind. So it is about a time for us to accelerate the movement. How do we replicate the good practices to other state-owned enterprises without duplicating the cost and the effort? So that's why we're trying to address 7 key areas to address in order to make state-owned enterprises become stronger and stronger and be able to compete globally. First thing first is the core of the culture. We call it core values. Core values will determine the long-term success of the companies. We we can copy the technology, we can copy the processes, but you cannot copy the culture. So that's why we need to have a very much strong culture in all of our cross state-owned enterprises in order to start think about the long-term sustainability success of the state-owned enterprise itself. So previously, each and every state-owned enterprises have their own core values. You know, for instance, Bank Mandiri have a teacher, BNI has a Prinsip 46, Jasa Marga has a tip, the Apik culture and so forth. So now it is about a time for us to think as a one big family with a one strong culture. So last month, Pak Erick Thohir already launched the core value. We call it akhlak, that's going to implement cross state-owned enterprises. So it is the new era for state-owned enterprises to have a same cultures. They're going to make us easier to mobilize talent cross state-owned enterprises itself. So this is the first area that we already addressed and already launched. The second area is employer branding. Actually, the talent that attracted to join state-owned enterprises has a common expectation on their side. They need a place to learn, actually. The talent need a space to grow, and also they want to contribute to the country. So it is the three words that we found most common on the talent that attracted to join state-owned enterprises. So that's why we're not going to invite talent that going, that's willing to shortcut to become rich at the short time. For instance, we don't attempt to attract talent like that. We only attract talent that's going to see the state-owned enterprises as a place to learn, to grow, and to contribute for the country. So that is employer branding that also we are going to launch in the very near time. The third element of human capital, of course, talent and succession management. In order to accelerate the movement, we need to spread the good talent from the good companies to put on the less development state-owned enterprises in order to accelerate their transformations. So we already create a talent pool consists of top 20% of talent in every state-owned enterprises. We are going to screen them down, then we are going to put them on a talent pool. Then as long as you get into that talent pool, you are now belong to the state-owned enterprises ministry office, so you'll be able to appoint in other state-owned enterprises. And then the fourth element of human capital area, of course, learning and development. Previously also we are very much overlapping on doing the learning. Every company develop their own learning centers, there are corporate universities. Probably we need to reorganize our corporate universities. The technical academies and the leadership academies should be reformulated due to refer to the business consolidation as well, which now already decided by the ministry will be considered of 12 clusters of business. So in the future, we're going to have the 12 clusters of state-owned enterprises. So that's why we also need to create a 12 technical academies in order to support the business side. And probably we only need to have one leadership academy that's going to serve all of state-owned enterprises. And the fifth element, of course, the performance and reward management system. As you probably know, currently the pay difference between the developed state-owned enterprises and the less developed state-owned enterprises is much bigger. So we should be there to have a vision that in the next futures we need to calibrate the pay, the pay structures, the total reward. So in order to get harmonizing among state-owned enterprises. So in order to get there, probably we need to to craft down the similar architecture on performance management, the similar architecture on the reward system itself. And then, of course, and the sixth element is human capital technology. Each and every state-owned enterprises now has their own technology platform, which different with others company. So this is going to lead to the difficulties when we do a data analytic and making decision based on the information, because we cannot, easily read the data from more than 100 state-owned enterprises, which subsidiaries and sub-subsidiaries, But if we can have a one platform of technology, we do expect that we're gonna have a real-time data and analytics, so we can make decisions more based on data and information. So I think this architecture now already been developed in the state-owned ministry office and ready to one by one and deploy to the state-owned enterprises. So I think there is the horizon, there is the vision that we trying to achieve in the next 5-10 years. So we do expect that if those subsystems implemented properly in the state-owned enterprises, we do expect that we're going to have a big group of companies that really to compete globally and also really to export talent to the other institutions in the country. So, Pak Diala, I think that is my opening speech. I do expect that these discussions this afternoon will provide more insight for us to improve our plan and improve our practices instead of enterprises, especially, but also for the good of Indonesia in general. Thank you very much for the attention. Have a good discussion.
Thank you very much, Pak Alex, for your inspirational keynote speech. Yeah, I wrote some key points that I want to amplify again, if you don't mind, Pak Alex. First, that all SOEs as an accelerator in the new normal scenario to rerun the engine of economy, and how to strengthen the core values akhlak for all of the state and enterprises. So every talents have akhlak in their life, in their heart, so everybody can do a very big contributions by doing the 7 key areas that addressed by Pak Alex Denni. Thank you very much, Pak Alex Denni, for your inspirational that guide our discussions today. Ladies and gentlemen, next we will hear the presentation sessions from 2 extraordinary panelists. Before that, I will introduce the panelists who will present their topics that are very relevant to the current situations and also will amplify what Alex Denni just shared to us about the keynote speech. First is President and CEO PT Garuda Indonesia Persero Tbk, Bapak Irfan Setiaputra. He was born in Jakarta, October 24th, 1964. He was graduated from Bandung Institute of Technology in informatics major. His professional journey that we can see as CEO Sigfox Indonesia, PT Kirana Solusi Utama, then as CEO PT Reswara Menergi Hartama, Commissioner PT Cipta Kridatama, Commissioner PT Sanggar Sarana Baja, President Commissioner PT Reswara Minergi Hartama, Chief Operating Officer PT ABM Investama, CEO PT Cipta Kridatama, CEO PT Titan Mining Indonesia, CEO PT Industri Telekomunikasi Indonesia Persero, and many more executives experience from Pak Irfan Setiaputra. Next, our second panelist, I will introduce also Professor Omar Toulan. He is a world-class professor from international from Institute of Management and Development, and he is a professor of strategy and international management. He was born in Cairo, Egypt, March 30, 1968. He's American and also Canadian. He was graduated from Georgetown University and hold his PhD in MIT. We can read his publications in a world-class strategic management journal, Journal of International Business, California Management Review, Organizations, European Business Review, and his professional journey that we can see, he was Professor McGill University, Associate Dean Academic, McGill University, Director MBA Program, Strategic Department Chair in McGill University, Professor in Stockholm School of Economics, Researchers in MIT, also consultant, McKinsey and Company, and Researchers Council of Economic Advisors to the President in White House in Washington, D.C., and visiting professor in London Business School, Imperial College. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I would like to invite Pak Irfan Setiaputra to present first regarding his topics in Garuda that relevant with the situations in the Indonesia. Pak Irfan Setiaputra, stage is yours, Pak.
Thank you, Mr. Diala. So, ladies and gentlemen, Pak Alex, thank you for this opportunity. Let me share you briefly on the situations that is currently happening with Garuda. So, as all of you may know, that Garuda Indonesia is not being isolated under the current situations, and as everybody knows also that the airline industry is one of the most highly impacted industry because of this pandemic situations here. So what we are facing today is basically a situation where it's really impacting the overall company, and the issue is merely more on the mobilization that was the fundamental of this industry, which is becoming a sinful activity in the sense of people are being asked to avoid traveling, and especially cross countries and cross cities here. The other challenge that we are facing also is that the consensus of major analysts is that the recovery will take 24 to 48 months. The most optimistic scenario will be that the airline industry will be back by the end of 2022 to be at the same level as 2019. As you may all know, also there's so many information, really news regarding this industry, and we are seeing that there are so many airlines are in bankruptcy situations. Most of them are cutting jobs, salary cuts, and the most situation that we are seeing surrounding us is the case of Thai Airways that was being declared as bankrupt. So this is a situation that we may foresee in the near future will still happen to some of these airlines, and the loss of the revenue is being predicted at around 314 billion in 2020 due to pandemic situation. So it's totally a disaster for the airlines, especially in the industry where everyone predicted a steady growth of 5% on year-on-year basis. And most of the airlines was being set up or being formed based on the situations of future growth. So a sudden hit on this industry in the several weeks only can get these situations. In the case of Garuda itself, we can see that we lost actually three big, we always call it the peak seasons. One is the Hajj and Umrah, and then the school holiday, and also what we call the mudik cases where millions of people are moving before Hari Raya. So we're also facing a situation where we all need to suspend flights to China. We also facing a situation where there's lots of regulations, especially what you call the PSPB, and situation where the central government and the provincial government was not in fully hand-in-hand shake on the situation of managing the airline industries here. For the case of Garuda, actually our flight frequency are being down at the level of 90%. So, and our airplanes were almost at 70% grounded. This situations is situations happening on the May time frame, where basically, and we still hope that this May 2020 is the month which is the lowest worst situation for Garuda and also for the other airlines here. But looking at the situation that we are facing for several months, we are still looking on the opportunities moving forward there. One is, we all believe that traveling is still a necessity. In Indonesia, we have three types of travelers. One is the people who needs to fly because of the job of their job, or being sent to other cities or to other countries for some organizations requests. The second one is that there are still people who travel on the need of what we call for socializations. Indonesians are very, very heavily in socialization activities. We sometimes fly to other cities just to attend weddings, just to meet and do reunions, and to go to other places for biking and where we call it the goers, and also to some places for marathon, for running and so on. So these three types of travelers. Sorry, the other one is for sure the traveling for vacations. Yeah, these three types of travelers today, we are seeing that most of the travelers, and the one that's using Garuda is basically for business travelers or mass travelers. Yeah, people who do for vacations and socialization is still on the wait and see status. Yeah, we are also seeing that Bali is still a hotspot for everybody, domestically and international. We are seeing also a big opportunity for Garuda to be a major player in the support of the economic recovery. And the other thing is also we have a complete set of companies inside the Garuda where we can fully support moving forward. The other and the last important one is that we foresee during this pandemic that the cargo and charter flight market is unfortunately a very big market that we haven't looked at it from time to time. Yeah. So there's also an issues or opportunity for us in the new normal area, as what we mentioned by Pa Alex Denni. So one is we have a huge opportunity to strengthen our domestic network together with our subsidiary CityLink, and to make us able to connect cities and connect also islands in Indonesia, and opening market for international travelers to come into Indonesia to Denpasar or Bali. The second opportunity that we are seeing is also optimizing cargo flight. For many years, Garuda is very focused on area of passengers. During this pandemic, we are seeing that cargo opportunity is huge. It's not only to make sure that goods are moved from one place to another place, it's also for us an opportunity to help small and medium business to deliver product from one place to another place. The third one is the opportunity for us to expand potential new road. This is an area where we're seeing a huge opportunity for us to bring in international travelers to come to Indonesia, especially also to Bali. We are seeing so many airlines coming to Bali for many years, and we are seeing an opportunity for Garuda and the tourism ministry to bring in international travelers to Bali directly. So the new theme coming soon will be traveling direct to Bali with Garuda. The last one is partnership with other airlines. This is to improve our connectivity and network throughout the whole globe. Yeah. To make sure that this will happen in the future, looking also the situation that we are facing today is that we need to be very, very clear on how to fix the basics and maintain healthy cash flow. As you may know, Garuda is also a company who is very, very expensive in leasing cost of our airlines. We are the best over the presentation several days ago with the minister, with the team of the Pak Tiko. It's very clear for everybody that Garuda is #1 in renting very expensive airlines. This is not only because of the type of the airlines that we are choosing, but mainly because of the wrongdoing things that happens on the past. Yeah. The #2 is to utilize the cargo potentials. Actually, under current conditions, we are seeing that we have more than 600 tons every day of potentials to move the goods from one place to another place, especially from Jakarta and Denpasar. The other one also for sure is to apply COVID-19 precautions and using new protocol moving forward for us in our operations. Yeah. The cargo business expansion that we are working on, beside pushing more and more and offering cargo opportunities for our customer, is we are creating new business that we call Kirim Aja. Kirim Aja is basically a disruptive model of courier where we actually offer customer who can produce products or want to send goods to other places to become a cargo agent and use an applications to arrange their shipment throughout Garuda Indonesia network. Currently we have 6,500 networks together with Citylink to make sure that these goods are going to be delivered on time and also to be delivered safely. These applications or this product just launched 2 months ago internally, and we are testing several new options, new features for our Kirim Aja goods, and this is going to be disrupt major courier business that is already happening in Indonesia. Yeah. So we do expect in the futures that Kirim Aja we can have millions of agents, and we'll be focusing more on the small medium businesses to make sure they can deliver their goods surrounding Indonesia also and also internationally with a much more cheaper and cost and different business model. This Kirim Aja are now start getting very popular in Jakarta, and we also offer this for shipping for delivery intra-cities. Yeah. Today we can offer with a very cheap price cost of transferring goods between places inside Jabodetabek using our current assets in Garuda. The other thing is also we are optimizing our cargo in our compartment passengers. Has been agreed by the regulatory. We are now allowed to put cargo on top of our seat or passenger compartment in such a way our airlines today are being supported this cargo this cargo besides the cargo compartment. So as you may know, any airplanes have 2 compartments. One is the cargo compartment, and then the second one is the passengers compartment. We have used this model starting at the pandemic situation where we are flying lots of goods from China to support the pandemic to support the settlement of pandemic in Indonesia using the 777 flights and also the other flights across Jakarta, across Indonesia. Today, at the minimum level, we have around 15 flights only for cargo for domestic, and we are going to increase from time to time depending on the situation that we are facing in the future. Yeah. So today, Garuda did not have any freighter or airline specialized in cargo, but we are using our passengers airlines to bring in cargo from one place to another place. It's getting very popular these days between Jakarta and Ujung Pandang and Jakarta and Ambon, especially for marine products here. We also provide now the charter flight with all our fleet that we have. We are being very successful to fly to several places, Brazil and also Colombia, besides also cities surrounding Asia. Yeah. This charter flight also being used for logistic of medical supplies during early stage of this pandemic, where we bring in lots of medical supplies from China. Yeah. The other thing is about adapting to the new normal. For sure, moving forward, traveling is a little bit different. We are expecting everybody to adjust. We are expecting also our team to do as much as possible, managing the situations in a new way. So we are doing optimization of operational in such a way that this can capture the pandemic situation. We are bringing also comfortable and safety flight journey to everyone. So our new tagline is flying safe and comfortable with Garuda, and for sure we are implementing new policies inside the airplanes where we execute the physical distancing. So if you have if you fly using 737 of Garuda, which with the seating arrangement of 3 and 3, normally we put we empty the middle seat in such a way that it's like a business class in Europe, where you have nobody in the middle. Yeah. So we also implement also a HEPA system inside the airlines to airplanes to make sure that the circulations of the air circulation is healthy and make sure that the virus is not spread out inside the cabin. We also implement, this is the new normal on passenger service, as you may say, together with Angkasa Pura. We are doing arrangement at the airport. We are doing also internally before flight, where we prepare our food much more hygiene. We sterilize the cabin, we sterilize the baggage, and we also sterilize the equipment. And on the in-flight, we package the meals in such a way that the interaction between the cabin crew and the passenger is being limited. We are doing also some seat allocations and providing personal kits here. On the side of the cargo logistics, for sure, we are implementing sterilization procedures for the for any cargo, and also implement procedures in the aircraft cabin, the one that being used, especially on the passenger compartment. The other much more concerning is the airplane who is not being used, which is 70% of our aircraft is now resting. And we need to make sure that the conditions of the aircraft is in a situation where it can be ready to fly. We call it a prolonged inspections, and we have a subsidiary, GMF AeroAsia, which is working around the clock to make sure that this prolonged inspection are all based on every aircraft maintenance manual. The last thing that I would like to share to all of you is that during this pandemic situations, we are now also, besides strengthening our health protocol, we also try to inspire people to travel with a common understanding that the only thing that can make us survive is the passengers. So we would like to make sure that we can increase the passenger capacity. We are making sure that we can campaign or sending a message in such a way that the confidence of people on traveling can be increased, because our internal research shown that around 60 to 70% of our normal passengers are in the wait and see positions, and they are only going to fly after the next 6 months, which is not good news for us. So the situation that we are facing today is to make sure and push as much as possible people to fly. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Pak Irfan, for your presentations. Ladies and gentlemen, we continue to the second panelist. We invite Professor Omar to present. Professor Omar, stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank very much the ministry as well as the forum organizers for inviting IMD as well as myself to partake in today's webinar, and also for sharing the stage with our distinguished co-panelists today. I would like to build upon what the previous speakers have talked about today in discussing the issue of how do we navigate what we call the new normal. I just want to start out with a quote by the current managing director of McKinsey & Company, and he states that the toughest leadership challenge we have today is now basically how to bring back business in an environment where a vaccine has yet to be found and economies are still reeling. So very much inconsistent with what Alex mentioned in the very beginning, we have to deal with in a situation where we do not have a vaccine yet, but how do we make sure that the economy continues to grow, businesses get back to operating? So to do so, I want to present what I call the COVID chain, right? And this is really, for me, a chain of causality, or a chain in which we need to think about how COVID eventually impacts us as a business. So if you think about the COVID itself, it has essentially two direct impacts. First is on the macroeconomy. What impact is COVID having on economies across the globe? As we know, it's been dramatic. I'll show you a few statistics in just a moment, but there is a macroeconomic impact, right? The reality, and one of the ironies with COVID is that on the one hand, COVID-19 represents what we would probably say the epitome of globalization, in the sense that it is blind to barriers. It is not stopped for passport immigration. It crosses boundaries extremely quickly, as we all know. At the same time, it's probably going to be the variable which causes the greatest contraction of globalization we've seen in a couple of decades. Right? So there's a macroeconomic impact of COVID. At the same time, the question is then, what impact does that macroeconomic change, as well as COVID itself, have on our customers, our consumers, right? And then what do those changes in consumer behavior, how do they impact our business models, right? And that's where I'm going to be spending most of the time talking about today. And then finally, how do changes in our business models hopefully prepare us for the next COVID or the next event which may have a similar type of impact. So with regards to the first issue, the impact on the macroeconomy, The Economist recently published a estimation of how long will it actually take for economies to get back to the levels that we exhibited just last year. Now, the range is quite dramatic, right? So some, including Indonesia, fortunately, is amongst those where the estimation is that it will return to its previous levels relatively quickly compared to other economies. And at the other end of the spectrum, you have countries such as Argentina, Italy, France, Mexico, where it may take up to 3 to 4 years for the return to previous economic levels, right? And the gap also in terms of the impact on the economy ranges from roughly 5% drop in GDP to all the way up to 10 to 12%, right? So we are talking about a recovery which will take multiple years in the vast majority of countries, okay? Now, a drawn-out recovery also contributes to a number of what I call geopolitical trends, which were not caused by COVID-19, but which are accentuated by it, right? And the first one for me is the increase in populism, right? We see across the globe an increase in populism, whether it be in parts of North America, Latin America, parts of Europe, populist, isolationist type approaches to government, where this crisis has simply contributed to that idea that we need to focus on ourselves versus the rest of the globe. And this is a challenge to globalization because, as I said, these types of governments have a tendency to be more inward focused than outward focused. Contributing to this or in line with this is the idea of increased protectionism, right? We've seen for several years a rise in protectionism, by governments of all different types in terms of protectionist economic policies, be they with regards to trade of goods and services or immigration and so forth. In addition, we've seen really what the Secretary General of the United Nations called an elimination of hegemony. We used to have a world where he called it so there is, to some extent, a lack of, I would say, of global leadership with regards to certain issues. And unfortunately, with COVID-19, this is a time when particularly we need global leadership. And we're in a state where we actually lack, I would say, a sense of global hegemony. And this has also contributed to a weakening of global institutions, whether they be the United Nations, the WHO. There's been a challenge to the role that these play across borders. Okay, so the drawn out recovery, as I said, will have an impact on these geopolitical trends. Okay, and I expect this to continue. It's not going to necessarily change in the short run. So the reality is we have to develop a plan. We have to think about the world with these trends in mind, right? It's not just COVID. It's COVID in conjunction with these other trends which have been taking place in the world. Now, what does all of this mean for customers, consumers, the people that we depend upon as organizations for our revenues, right? And this is basically both a direct impact from the COVID itself, as well as an indirect impact of the fact that the economy is slowing down and weakening buyer potential. So with regards to the customer, okay, as I said, we have to think both of the impact of the macroeconomy as well as the specific pandemic on your customer base. The fact is, some companies will suffer, others will benefit, as we've seen, but you cannot make broad assumptions. Just to give you one example, I'm working with a large pharmaceutical company based in Europe. Most people have thought that the healthcare industry would be an industry that overall will benefit from a pandemic such as this. But the reality is this company in specific, one of their major business units relates to cancer treatment, right? And with cancer treatment, what we've seen is that as a result of COVID, many cancer treatments have been postponed because of the lack of hospital space in many parts of the world. And as a result, this company has actually seen their sales drop because of the COVID crisis. So we can't make broad assumptions that impact some industries versus others, okay? And overall, as industries, what we see is that some will take longer to recover than others, okay? Some such as, this was a report again, well, this report was actually published by McKinsey & Company, that there will be different recovery times for different industries. Some such as arts and entertainment, some such as accommodation and food services. What we see is that it may take several years. It may take up to 4 to 5 years for these industries to recover, okay? And particularly concerning are those where you have a large presence of small businesses, which is what the right-hand column shows. In those situations, small businesses have a shorter period with which they can sustain an economic downturn. Larger firms in general will have more economic resources, though they are not immune as well. But small businesses in particular are more susceptible. So those where the recovery will take a longer period of time and have a large share of small businesses in the GDP are those which are going to be at most susceptible. Now, what we have to think about is also to understand the specific impact, as I said, of this crisis on your customer base. And this was a survey which was done specifically in Indonesia. And it was asking customers, or consumers, I should say, what are they most worried about as a result of the COVID crisis, right? And what you see from here is that people are worried about different things. The first one, working outside my home. The majority of people are not extremely worried about this, right? Some are, but of the different variables, it's the one where actually people are most comfortable. On the other hand, things such as using public transport people are extremely worried about. Okay, again, this was done in Indonesia in the past couple months following the COVID crisis. Now, why is it important to understand where are the specific concerns of your customers, right? I'll give you one example of a Chinese car rental company. In the first month of COVID, they lost 90% of their business. Nobody wanted to rent their cars, right? But what they did is they essentially combined the first variable, working outside my home, with the third from the bottom, which is the use of public transport. And through social listening, they basically listened to social chatter taking place. And what they realized is that, particularly in the tech sector, there were a lot of employees who wanted to get to work, but were very concerned about using public transport. So what they did is they specifically designed services, touchless delivery of cars, for people to be able to basically use rental cars to get to their offices as opposed to taking public transport, right? And within 6 weeks, they had recovered 90% of their business, right? So understanding the detailed concerns of your customers is fundamental if you want to be able to adjust your service profile to be able to accommodate for this new reality. Okay. Now, this is also potentially an opportunity. You know, it's horrible to sort of say that out of this COVID crisis may come opportunities, but it is a reality, right? There are firms which are benefiting, as I mentioned before, a lot of them basically digital-based firms. And there are opportunities for new forms of purchasing, new brands to come into the market, new suppliers to replace other ones. So we cannot assume that the market is contracting equally for all players in the market. We have to really think about how can we position ourselves to be one of those organizations that actually benefits, whether we're talking about airlines, whether we're talking about consumer goods, whether we're talking about other state-owned enterprises, right? So you really have to understand the specifics of how is this impacting the change in behavior of your customers, okay? Now, again, this survey, again, based in Indonesia, what they saw, and it's not surprising, is that amongst the reasons for changing from one company to another as a supplier or as a brand is better value, right? Be that in terms of prices, delivery costs, package sizes. So if you are going to succeed in this period, you really have to be focusing on what is it that your customer is looking for. Value, convenience, okay, these are the driving factors. Other issues, at least for the temporary period, such as quality, take a little bit of a second order effect. Now, one thing we have to understand is we're facing a lot of changes as a result of COVID, right? Changes in the way our customers interact, changes in the way we provide services to our customers. What we have to really think about, because again, the idea is how do we transition to a new normal, is which of these changes are, as we call, works for now, that once a solution to COVID is achieved or a vaccine is discovered, that these solutions will no longer be necessary or people will not necessarily want to use them, versus what we call accelerated shifts, where COVID caused the shift to accelerate, but it's not going to disappear once COVID is over, right? And these are the types of shifts that we really want to be focusing on because they're not going to go away, right? And then there are certain ones which we're still not sure about, whether or not they're here to stay or not. But what you really have to understand and place your organization in is this change in the way we do business something which is temporary, it works for now, or is it a permanent shift, okay? Just to give you an example. Most people said, you know, remote learning for their children, okay, maybe a temporary shift, that they would like it to go back to face-to-face afterwards, whereas remote learning for themselves at a professional level, most people said it's here to stay, right? So we really need to think specifically for our business unit, what is the impact? Is it short-term? Is it going to be a long-term impact? Because that will also influence how much do we invest in the new normal versus not. Now, what is the impact of these changes in the customer behavior on specifically our business model, right? And to do that, I want to talk about 4 specific issues, because we need to think about reimagining our business model, okay? Not just tweaking it or adapting it. You really need to think about how do we redesign it altogether. And that, for me, entails 4 stages. You have to think about what impact it has on your strategy, what impact it has on your structure, the way you're organized, what impact it has on your operations, and finally, and for me most importantly, what is the impact that we need with regards to mindset and leadership to reimagine the business, right? With regards to strategy, we need to think, particularly in the short run, and I think we heard this from Pak Irfan, we need to switch from growth to profitability, right? Cash is king when we're talking about the crisis, right? We need to make sure we manage our cash balances. Growth is nice, but it's not the focus at the current time. You need to prioritize your revenue streams, right? Just give you an example of the company Spotify. Spotify, again, is one of these companies where people thought as a result of this crisis, people would be streaming more online because people are based at home. The reality is this is a company which depends not so much on subscription revenue, but rather on advertising revenue, right? And as a result, advertising dried up dramatically and its revenue streams did as well. And so it had to introduce new products, specifically podcasts, to develop new revenue streams. So when you're thinking about revenue, and as I think, Pak Irfan highlighted extremely insightfully here, you really need to prioritize your revenue streams. You need to figure out which revenues are going to have the highest impact and be the fastest to implement in the short term. Okay, whether it's e-commerce, whether it's potentially an acquisition, but again, for your specific entity, what is the impact and what is the speed at which we can get those revenues up and running? Thirdly, we need to think about customer centricity and understand expectations of our customers even more than in the past. Again, a company like Unilever, it was able to quickly adapt its product portfolio, dropping production of products where people weren't buying them as much anymore, such as face creams and so forth, and increasing the production of hygienic products where there was a much more heightened demand. So really listening to our customer becomes central. Need for heightened strategic agility. And I'm going to mention this a few times. I think agility in the COVID era has become a bit of a buzzword, but we need to think about how can we balance short-term opportunism, which might help us with our cash position, with long-term focus. We do not simply want to, as we say, wing it, right? Agility does not mean winging it. It does mean being prepared, right? And as Pak Alex had mentioned, scenario planning becomes a fundamental component of that. How do we think about the future potential scenarios? How do we mitigate those? How do we potentially try to take advantage of what we view as potential futures, while maintaining, as I say, an agile approach? Okay. With regards to structure, we need to rethink the global-local balance in decision-making, particularly for multinational companies. Today, given a lot of the macro trends which I mentioned in the beginning, compounded with the uniqueness of how COVID is being dealt with in country by country, you need more local authority. You need more local decision-making. So how do we rebalance that centralization of authority versus giving more authority to people who are closer to the problem on the ground? We need to rethink about how we work and relate to each other, right? As we've seen, we have different ways of working today, be it remote, be it online. Which of these will last? How do we rethink this to make sure that we're being as effective as possible? Reevaluate the role of partnerships and ecosystems, right? As this was mentioned earlier, maybe today we may need to partner with firms which previously we considered as competitors. We may need to think about what our role in ecosystems are. How do we leverage digital partners, maybe to a greater extent than we have in the past? And we need to do this with a sense of urgency and speed. Okay, we cannot take this in short term, in long drawn out processes. That car company I mentioned before, the Chinese car company, which was able to adapt their processes, they also changed their decision-making process from a 2 to 3 week process to a 2 to 3 day process. So this crisis really is focusing us on being much more speedy with regards to our decision making. Give you one example, a company called Snap Travel. This again was a company which lost the vast majority of its revenue in March, and in 2 months later they were profitable. And how did they do it? They did it with a specific playbook. And I'm not saying this is the playbook you should be using, but what I'm saying is that every organization needs to have a playbook to address this crisis. Their playbook had 10 steps, which involved obviously putting out the fires first, removing any distractions, setting a clear direction that everything should have a positive return, positive profitability, tackle the hardest part, which is payroll. You can't ignore that. Again, it's a challenge depending on the type of organization we're talking about, but it's an issue which needs to be addressed. Ensure alignment within the economy, within the company. Everybody needs to be on the same page more than ever today. Step 5, identify and renegotiate all costs, right? You need to think about your cost structure, which is why cost transparency becomes fundamental. We have to understand where our true costs are. Tighten up, in their case, marketing costs, making sure every channel was profitable, adapt their products, innovate to develop new resource streams, such as the one I described for Spotify, okay? Reach out to your most loyal customers. They are the ones that you need to be able to depend upon. And finally, hold on to cash as much as possible. So this was their 10-step playbook. Again, yours might be very different, but you need to have a playbook because it allows you to get everybody on the same page. Okay. Operations. A few issues to think about with our operations. One is building up more resilience through local sourcing. Again, given the change in macroeconomics and let's say increase in protectionism, for those companies which are international, you may need to think about increasing your local sourcing. Accelerate digitalization. Nike is a company which was able to grow its sales 30% in China during this crisis through digitalization. Heightened automation, whether it's processing bank loans, whether it's in the manufacturing process, leveraging technology to a greater extent to increase automation. And finally, increase the transparency of your operating costs. Really, as I said, understand where are those costs coming from. And finally, rethink the role of your operations in your competitive advantage. And I actually put IMD down here for one thing, because we have a beautiful campus, both in Switzerland as well as in Singapore, beautiful facilities. But the reality is right now, we don't have many of our participants at those facilities. Most of our programs are being done online, though we hope to welcome everybody back relatively soon. But the value of your assets changes. So we had some assets we had as a competitive advantage related to physical assets, though I'd say the majority are more on the human capital side. But you reevaluate the value of your competitive advantage based on the change in the value of your operations. And finally, for me, and I'm going to conclude in just a moment here, mindset and leadership. We need to reimagine or unfreeze our business model. We need clear goals, we need focused teams, rapid decision-making should replace bureaucracy, but we need to be able to unfreeze our current conception of ourselves. Airbnb was originally a matcher between renters and customers, and what it's transformed into is a lifestyle platform. View this as an opportunity to rethink. Never waste a good crisis, right? This is an opportunity for us to rethink our business from scratch, understand who we are, what is our shared sense of purpose, okay? To be proactive in doing so rather than letting somebody else tell us what we should be doing. And finally, to think of this as a way of leveraging a startup mentality. This is an opportunity for change. Change requires, as I said, speedy reaction. So we need action in some cases over research, we need testing, over analysis, because we have to be able to make these decisions quickly in this period of time. To give you a few quotes that one of my colleagues, Stefan Garelli, often uses, you know, the one who insists on perfect clearness before he decides, never decides. This is one of Switzerland's most famous philosophers. We study a good idea until it becomes a bad one. Undisclosed CEO. And finally, the real difficulty lies not in developing new ideas, but in escaping from the old ones. John Maynard Keynes. So what is critical here is that we are able to think outside the box, that we're able to make relatively quick decisions, right, and move forward. We're talking about renewal, not return. Okay, this chairman of Siemens in a recent interview. We're not going back to the past. We're basically going to renew ourselves, and the question is how. We need to be bold, we need to be creative, we need to be confident, okay? And we need to be ready for what comes next. Because today, we face the COVID chain. The question is, what will be the next crisis? It may not be a pandemic, it may not be an economic collapse, it may be something else, but we need to have that agility built into our business models to be able to prepare for it. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Omar, for your presentations. We give applause for Professor Omar and also Pak Irfan for their presentations today. Now we will discuss in Q&A sessions. I will facilitate the discussions by selecting questions from the question and answers. Then there are a lot of questions that has been submitted in the Q&A box. First questions I would like to raise from Miss Febrinas Tiwo. She's from PT Perkebunan Nusantara 14, and she would like to ask to Pak Irfan Garuda. So her question is, in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic, mobilizations of local and foreign communities is very limited. Naturally, influences the operational performance of Garuda Indonesia at the time. What breakthrough or innovations have been implemented by Garuda Indonesia in order to maintain its operational activities? This question is for you, Pak Irfan. You can respond the questions, Pak.
Okay, thank you for the questions. Yeah, basically, this is a quite standard model of operations that we are having in the airline business. So I can say that from innovation perspective, operations, yes, we are doing some here and there fine tune of the operations in such a way to minimize the cost of our operation side while still maintaining the safety and other services that being part of our value proposition to our customer. Yeah. So with regards to the situation with the decreasing of the flights, what we are now doing is much more on the sense of reviewing our cost structure in this, especially for the aircraft leasing. And this is also a good time for us to negotiate with our lessor. And this is also a good time for us to delete from our fleet those type of airlines that is not being fit with our model of operations in Indonesia, and then be much more focused on certain area, which is we are much more better in managing our fleet. Yeah. On the operations side, which is also what we are doing now, is much more also focusing on route management. Yeah. It's a little bit funny, for instance, that sometimes we don't care about the schedules of our flight in and out of one places or one cities. Yeah. As a illustrations, yeah. We previously, before the new management team is on board, previously there are some flights that is entering Bali at night, yeah, and then leaving Bali at early in the morning. Yeah. This will be viewed from the traveler's perspective as airlines who will make them lost 2 days when we're talking about Bali, for instance. Yeah, there are flights from Australia who arrive in Bali at around 6 to 7 p.m. And normally when this traveler enter the hotel, it's already at 9 or 10 p.m., which basically they cannot do anything on this day. And then when they fly out from Bali, the flight time is around 8 or 9 a.m. in the morning, which make them very angry to leave the hotel because they lost the free breakfast, and then they need to run to the airport, and then doing nothing at the airport except running to the boarding gate here. We should change the schedule in such a way that the airplane arriving in Bali should be arrived at around 11 a.m. in the morning, where they have quite time to enter the hotel and be at the hotel at early check-in or check-in time, and they still can spend the whole day in Bali, enjoying Bali, and then leave Bali at 7 or 8 p.m. at night, where they leave the hotel at around 11 a.m. and they need to do something in Bali and then spending money and spending time in Bali, which then help the economy. So this kind of things, when we look at the details, make us possible today and in the future to be able to put our positions much more better compared to our competitor, or at least we can provide a much more better schedule to the customer. We normally are being very focused on either other area. We are playing on our pricing strategy, which is normally insufficient. But if we can put a much more focus on schedules, then we are in the better positions of our services are offering in front of the customer. So there are lots of small things that we are doing. I cannot declare it as innovation at this stage because it's a very normal business practice in an airline and any airline industry around the world. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Pak Irfan, for your questions. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to convey regards from Pak Alex because Pak Alex has another important meeting. So he convey his regards to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. We continue to the questions number 2 for Pak Irfan. These questions raised from Pak Brahmana, he's from Telkom. The questions is, due to the COVID-19 situations around the world and in terms of business success, what are the Garuda key business initiative for the next 5 years? And he convey his proud of Garuda that never stop flying. And then the second question is also from Pak Brahmana. What are the Garuda key competitive strategies to compete with other big competitors in domestic and in global, especially for cargo business, Pak Irfan, please.
Okay, let me answer the second one. I'm much more interested in the competitive strategy. So again, for the cargo business, again, one is most important thing is your network. With Garuda and Citylink all together, I think we cover almost every big cities in Indonesia, or almost big cities in Indonesia, 6,500 network here. Second one is that we need to be on time. We need to deliver our promise. This is what we are now facing a challenge with our cargo business inside the Garuda. But the number 3, the most important thing is we need to rely ourselves. We need to set our own destiny. I'm saying it in this word. And we need to set our own destiny. In any cargo business in airlines, everybody is dependent on the concept of agencies here. This agency is the one which dictate what kind of goods should go to this island, what kind of goods should go to that island. That has been for many years this kind of model. So what we are trying to do with Kirim Aja is basically to define our own destiny and go directly to the customer rather than focusing to our agent. This is the biggest mistake of Garuda 20 years ago, that we are very focusing on our engagement with travel agents. We decide our destiny through our travel agent. When the previous management set their strategy to go directly to the customer, basically it's much cheaper and we can engage directly to the customer, and the customer can go us to either our travel, our counter, or direct to our website there. So Singapore Airlines has done it for years. We are quite late on that, and we are now focusing on that area where we ask our customer to go directly to us rather to travel agents. Yeah, travel agent is an industry which is fading away in the next in the futures. Yeah, so this is going to be happen also with cargo. We are going to go directly to our customer. We would like to set our own destiny. We would like to communicate with our customer. We would like to understand their needs. This is the key competitive strategy that we are focusing for to on the cargo business. Initiative for the next 5 years, like I mentioned before, we are going to be very focused. The next initiative for us is to go bigger CityLink, because this is maybe the company that is much more fit with our domestic market, which is very price sensitive. If you have an opportunity to grow our fleet in the future, we will be very focused on CityLink for domestic market, to enter also remote areas in several places as part of our mandate to connect Indonesians everywhere in Indonesia. Garuda will be very focused on big cities. Garuda will be very focused on bringing international travelers to travel to destinations like Bali. So we will see in the futures that Garuda will split the flight internationally, not 100% or not 90% to Jakarta, but we would like to bring our international traveler to the destination directly without going to Jakarta. Yeah. This is being discussed with several parties, and we do hope that we can finalize everything when the pandemic is over. You may heard the plan of Garuda to fly directly to places like Paris or Mumbai, Delhi, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. The value proposition that we are offered to those travelers is you fly directly to Denpasar, because we cannot compete to international airlines who is focusing on hub bases like Singapore Airlines, Etihad, Qatar, Emirates, and Turkish Airlines. We should go to the customer with a value position of flying direct. Yeah. And we have that capability. We have the places, fantastic places like Bali, Labuan Bajo. We should not be afraid of doing that, with all the participation of all the people in the travel industry in Indonesia. Second one is for sure cargo. Cargo will be our main focus. We will be going direct to all places like I mentioned before, because we believe that by bringing cargo with cheaper propositions around Indonesia directly to places will help the economy of small and medium businesses. That's the only thing that we should do in the future to bring relevance to the Indonesian economy. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Pak Irfan, for your explanations regarding the questions, the short term and also the long term for Garuda in facing the new norm, and how Garuda has been done strategic actions, and also what is the opportunity that can be raised from business model innovations that has explained very well by Pak Irfan. Then the next questions for Professor Omar. These questions regarding the leadership and mindset. The question raised by Pak Triaji Priyo Pratomo is from LPP Agro, and also from Ibu Krisyanta from PT BKI. The question is how to enable leaders to be able to manage paradoxes in this crisis, and how do you think companies who are still adapting to new cultures internally can adapt to the recent pandemic situations? Please, Professor Omar.
Great, thank you very much. I'm going to start again with the second question, actually, with regards to how do you deal where you're still actually trying to incorporate different cultures, be it through a merger, be it through a combination of different activities. How do you then deal with the pandemic? For me, to be honest, the pandemic presents an opportunity to unite people, right? When you have two different organizations, in most cases, what will bring them together is a crisis, right? Without the crisis, pre-existing tensions, pre-existing ways of doing things are harder to change. As I mentioned before, don't waste a good crisis, right? When we think about when do organizations really change, it's when they're on the verge, when they are being forced to, right? So in that sense, I would say this is actually an opportunity for many organizations which were dealing with this challenge of trying to unify different cultures within the organization to try to bring everybody together. That does require a type of leadership which is both empathetic, right? Focused and very clear in the direction that they want the organization to go in. Right? And ideally, when you are trying to bring two different organizational cultures together within one, you want to make it such that one isn't purely dominating the other, but that you're taking the best of both and coming up with one unified culture. But again, from my point of view, this is a situation where, though challenging, it does present the opportunity for organizations to actually unify themselves beyond a common set of beliefs. But leadership really does have to step up to the table here and really provide that inspirational leadership, but also the empathy to the different people who are organized within it. With regards to the first question, how to handle paradoxes. There's no easy answer to this. Handling paradoxes within any type of decision-making process is always tricky. Now, I think in general, we have to do this. We always are dealing with short-term versus long-term. We're dealing with local versus foreign, right? As a professor of international management, the main paradox that most multinational firms face is how do you balance the need for local responsiveness with the need for global efficiency? So we are always faced with different paradoxes. There are certain structural ways you can try to deal with these paradoxes, such as matrix type organizations, where you have the interests of the two aspects of the paradox basically at the same level. The challenge with that is that oftentimes takes longer to come up with decisions. And in today's environment, we need faster decisions, right? So you have to mentally be able to deal with these two issues at the same time. That's at the core of agility. If you are not able to handle this paradox in your head, you won't be able to handle it in your operations, right? So for me, actually, the handling the paradox in one's mind does require, like I say, trained leaders. It requires leaders which are more agile and maybe not necessarily your traditional ones. But I think it is something where, given the environment today, we have no option, right? The best way for us to adapt and to change is by necessity. And I think in today's environment, it's very clear that that is a necessity.
Right, thank you, Professor Omar. Next question is from Ibu Yanti Putri. She's from RNI. He said that in case of state-owned enterprises, we have to revisit on our corporate strategy planning, starting from this year to next 5 years. But she also have to keep an eye with the time needed to decide the strategies in due course. We have no time for trial and error. What should the leaders do in this time of crisis, Professor Omar?
Exactly. No, and I think this goes back to what Pak Alex was mentioning before. Agility does not mean, as we say in English, winging it or just making decisions on the fly. It does mean we have a direction, and that direction is provided by your longer 5-year or 10-year plan. Now, the reality is, under today's situation, you have to be much more agile in terms of adapting within that. And one tool which a lot of organizations use, and as I see the ministry is using as well, is scenario planning. So the idea is that you have your global direction, but you also prepare what happens if our base case scenario does not actually occur. How do we adapt our plan, right? And that's essentially what you need to do. You do not want to simply throw out your strategic plan because the current situation has changed. You want to basically try to preempt by thinking about what could happen, develop specific strategic adaptations for those different contingencies or different potential outcomes, and have those prepared. Because you want to be ready for, as I said in the very last slide, for the next crisis, right? So we need to be thinking not just about, you know, how do we react to COVID-19, but how do we react to the next crisis, which is going to come about? And we don't want to have to be unprepared to do so. So in like I said, scenario planning is one way to incorporate adjustments to a longer term strategy.
All right. This is the last questions because there are many questions delivered to Pak Omar and also Pak Irfan. Because of time, I just want to highlight one question to Professor Omar. This is from Pak Cipto from Garuda. The pandemic changed customers' behavior significantly, mainly driven by digital business model. But actually, it's not sufficient to leverage the GDP growth. In your opinion, in future or in the short term, if the vaccine could found, hopefully, and the business back to normal, are there another or next business model which different than what was doing before pandemic and in pandemic situations?
Yeah, I think, you know, one way to think about this is almost as a boomerang effect. You know, once hopefully we get a vaccine, how far back to the previous normal will we go? And I would say it's going to vary industry by industry. Some industries may go back almost 100%, okay? Other industries may never go back, and most are going to have somewhere in between. So they will have to change their business model in the long run. Now, digital is obviously one aspect which has gone extreme during the COVID crisis, whether it's through online purchasing, whether it's provision of digital services. For me, in the future, this was simply an acceleration of a trend which was happening, right? Think about the retail sector. The retail sector, you have physical retail, stores, you have online retail, and then you have what we call omni-channel retail, which is where you are combining both. Right, where the same entity, they have their online platform, they have their physical store platform. What this crisis has highlighted is the importance of unifying those two different aspects. So for me, digital, in some of these sectors, the level of digitalization may contract somewhat in the short term, but it will continue to expand in the long run once a vaccine is found. But we have to think about how do we actually unify digital with physical activities in a better way than we are currently doing. That for me is going to be the permanent change going forward.
All right, thank you, Professor Omar. Yeah, the question and answer is end for this session. So we would like to thank to Professor Omar and also Pak Irfan for the sharing and also responding all of the questions that has been highlighted. And thank you very much for.
Can I give some comments for the last?
Oh yeah, we will give yes,
add Prof. Omar
yes.
Statement.
We will give the time, Pak Irfan. Thank you very much for all of the participants who raised questions through Q&A box. There are about 32 questions that we collected, but we cannot facilitate all of the questions. So for the closing remarks from all of the panelists, I give a chance to Pak Irfan first, please.
Yeah, thank you. Just to add what Prof. Omar mentions here, I think let's see this pandemic as an opportunity rather than a threat. Yeah. Definitely. Complaining will not make any changes here. And expecting that the situation before pandemic will be returned, I think is an insanity. Yeah. So what is really gonna happen in the future is the way we interact is becoming totally different. Yeah. So let's see. Let's have a look at that situation, and let's see that situation as an opportunity for every companies to survive in the future. Yeah. So the second one, my comment is this is the time to prepare all of our company when the pandemic is over. From the health perspective, I'm not saying from others' perspective. From the health perspective, when the pandemic is over, can we become a different company, and can we become a company where it can be much more competitive and much more agile? If not, then another crisis will happen. We'll be facing the same situation again and again. Yeah. Thanks. That's all for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pak Irfan, for your closing remarks. Then I invite Professor Omar also to give the closing remarks, responding all of the situations that you have heard from Pak Irfan, from the participants who raised questions, and also the presentations from Pak Alex and also Pak Irfan. Please, Professor Omar.
No, thank you very much. I mean, like I say, I think it was wonderful to hear from my co-panelists on what they're doing on the ground, both from the government point of view as well as from the company operational point of view. And as just reiterating what Pak Irfan just mentioned, we have to first of all view this as it's not going to go back to the way it was in the past. We have to be prepared for new reality. Now the question is, how long will that new reality last? And what will be the next new normal? And so for me, what's critical is that we not only prepare, like I say, for the post-COVID vaccine world, but that we prepare for our ability to adapt to new normals, right? So it's not just trying to predict what the next state is, it's developing the capabilities to be more agile, to be more proactive, to be quicker in the way we make decisions and do things, so that if another, or I should say, when another fundamental shift takes place, we're prepared for that. This is a crisis which, I hopefully in 10, 15 years in the future from now, by looking back, we'll be able to say that we learned something from this, that despite all the tragedy and death which took place, there was a benefit associated to it. And I think we shouldn't waste that, as Pak Irfan has mentioned.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Omar, Pak Irfan, and all of contributions from participants today. Now, FEB would like to express its deepest gratitude for the contributions made by Pak Irfan Setiaputra and Professor Omar in today's Global Business Excellence conversations. I would like to invite Chairman of FEB, Pak Agung, to convey the appreciations for those speakers who has already shared his insights and knowledge. Thank you for from Pak Alex also that has been shared the keynote speech. Please, Pak Agung.
Thank you very much, Pak Diala. We highly appreciate to all speakers and participants for attending actively in this great webinar. Special thanks for Pak Irfan Setiaputra and also Pak Professor Omar Toulan, as well as Pak Alex Denni and all the Ministry Office of State-Owned Enterprise for great contribution into this global conversation. I believe we have great and a beneficial lesson learned from the speakers. Allow me to share my notes, my lesson learned, especially from the leadership point of view. What leaders need during the crisis, there are 5 better notes, important notes. One is what leaders need during a crisis is behaviors and mindset that inspires positivity, optimism, but still realistic, and develop sense of purpose. The second is flexible, but can still make the tough call even if that makes them unpopular. The third lesson learned is we have to motivate our people to have mindset of transformation, renewal, not return to the past. We have to develop clear goals, and fast decision-making. We have to replace all the bureaucracy in our company. So thank you very much for all the participants. Hopefully, we can fix the crisis and have a better plan for the next normal. Thanks and best warm regards for you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pak Agung, for your closing remarks. And next, I would like to invite Professor Miziks to give your closing remarks from these issues. Professor Miziks, please.
Thank you so much. Again, thank you very much for participating. I want to just emphasize one thing that I said earlier, that this webinar reinforced to me. I said at the very beginning that what I'm seeing from our partners, from the companies that we work with in Indonesia, is you guys are taking the opportunity to really change quite a lot of things in Indonesia, catching up very, very well economically with regard to the virus. The comments from Pak Irfan were very, very much in that flavor. So I congratulate you for making so many changes in record time. This is not an easy industry to make fast changes. So I'm delighted to see you've been able to do that. And I also want to emphasize what Pak Alex said at the beginning, is the importance of education and the importance of training. And as you said, you're going to be the fifth, maybe even the fourth largest economy in the world, which will require numerous investment in upskilling everybody. And I'm hoping that this is going to accelerate this. And I hope that we will continue to work with as many of you as possible to make sure that we can bring Indonesia to its full future. So thank you so much again. And I hope next time we're gonna see each other in person. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Music. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the final for our sessions today. Thank you for your presence and participation that has been given in today's webinar. Please forgive us if there is any inconvenience in this event. I am Dialau Tabalian, and like what Professor Omar said in the final presentations, be bold, be creative, and be confident, and be ready for what comes next. See you in our next Forum Ekselen BUMN webinar. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Santi, Santi, Santi Om. Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Diala, for your great coordination.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Irfan. Thank you, Professor Mistik. Thank you, Professor Omar. Thank you, Ibu Kodi. Thank you, Pak Agung. Thank you, Mas Adit.
Great, Pak.
Thank you. Thank you, Pak Agung.
Siap. Thank you, Pak Diala, teman-teman FEB. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mas Agung, Mas Bangun, Mas Adit, sama Mbak Ica juga. Thank you banyak.
Yeah, Pak Diala, I do want to say a special thank you. You've done an amazing job facilitating. It was a joy. Everything was, so smooth, and you did a really fantastic job.
Thank you, Professor Misik, for your kindness. Thank you, Professor Misik. Thank you, Professor Omar.
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Bu Kodi.
Bye-bye.
It was a pleasure working with the team. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
You're welcome.
Thank you. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Okay.